The air over Morning Rock shimmered with heat and judgment. It was Sunday, but not a holy one. Dust clung to the hems of dresses and the tips of polished boots as a gathering of townsfolk formed a tight circle around the chapel yard. Silence clotted the air, broken only by the scrape of wood against stone as they dragged the girl to the steps. Calumet Hollister stood barefoot, wrists bound in hemp, blood from the raw scrape on her knee darkening the hem of her pale dress. She did not beg. She did not cry. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, her jaw set. Eyes the color of prairie sky fixed straight ahead, not on the crowd, not on the preacher, not even on the man who ordered this reckoning. She stared into something beyond all of it, as if she were already gone. Dunley Baird, the man who had summoned her west with a letter and a promise, stood like a bloated shadow beside the minister. His black suit strained at the seams, sweat pooling beneath his chin. He wiped his brow, then nodded once. The whip cracked. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Calumet flinched, but she didn't fall. Another strike followed. Then another. Her back stiffened. Her body trembled, but she remained upright, defiant even in disgrace. She had refused him. That was the true crime. Dunley had paid the mail-order agency for a wife. When Calumet stepped off the stagecoach 3 days ago, suitcase in hand, locket around her neck, she'd expected a partner. Not a man with greasy breath, hands like meat hooks, and eyes that weighed her like cattle. She said no. Softly, clearly. Then, louder when they insisted. But in Morning Rock, a contract was sacred, even when the ink was soaked in desperation. Her younger sister Junie watched from the edge of the crowd, pale as bone, fingers clenched in the folds of her calico dress. They'd come together, Calla and Junie, from Topeka after their mother passed. Junie was meant to stay hidden, to work somewhere nearby, perhaps in the boarding house. But when Calla refused the match, Dunley had accused her of deception. 2 girls for the price of 1 lie, he'd snarled. The preacher hadn't even blinked. And still, the lash came down. Silas Truwell stood near the back, a quiet figure leaning against the church fence, hat low over his brow. The townspeople gave him wide berth, not out of fear, but reverence. A widower of 5 years, a man who buried his son and wife beneath the same cedar, Silas had grown a stillness in him that no man wished to disturb. His land sat dry and half-broken at the edge of town, horses limping through the dust, crops failing under stubborn skies. Yet he never complained, never drank, never struck a man even when provoked. Folks called him cursed, but they also called him kind. When Calla finally collapsed onto the chapel steps, shoulders heaving, breath shallow, Silas moved. No announcement, no permission. Just the soft creak of leather as he walked through the crowd, his limp barely noticeable. He knelt beside her, removed his hat, and lifted her with the care one gives to things already shattered. Dunley shouted. The preacher stepped forward. But Silas said nothing. Just walked away with her in his arms, eyes forward, steps steady. That night, the town was quieter than usual. The saloon piano played only 2 songs before falling still. The church bells didn't ring for supper. Whispers replaced conversation. Some called Silas a thief. Others a savior. Junie didn't speak at all. She sat alone on the edge of her bed, listening to the coyotes howl in the distance, wondering if she should have taken her sister's place from the start. At Silas's homestead, Calla lay wrapped in a patchwork quilt, her wounds washed with cold water, her fever watched over by a man who spoke with silence. He didn't ask her anything. He didn't offer sermons or judgment. Just left small things: clean linen, cool tea, a dish of cornbread near the window. She noticed the way he moved around her, like she was made of glass and truth, both easily shattered. On the 3rd day, she whispered, "Why didn't you let them finish?" He didn't look up from the firewood he was stacking. "Because you didn't deserve it." "Don't know that I deserve anything better," she said. He paused, set the log down, wiped his hands on his trousers. "That's for you to decide." It was the longest conversation they had in a week. Back in town, Junie made her way to Dunley's estate. She walked through the iron gates with her chin low and her heart tucked in her sleeve. He met her on the steps, cigar clenched in his teeth. "You here to beg for your sister?" "No," she said softly. "I'm here to take her place." He looked her up and down, and for a moment she thought he might strike her. But then he grinned. "That's more like it." So Junie became Mrs. Baird, in name if not in heart. She cooked. She sewed. She stood beside him in church with her eyes on the hymnal, and her soul miles away. Dunley never smiled, not really. He wanted Calla, the girl with fire, with steel, with fight in her eyes. Junie, he tolerated. But resentment brewed in him like spoiled beer, sour and waiting. Calla didn't know. She spent her days sweeping the porch, boiling herbs for the pain in her ribs, watching the sky turn colors she never noticed before. Silas never hovered, never watched her like men did. He fixed the door hinge. He left her space. And every evening, he sat beside her on the porch swing, hands resting on his knees, boots tapping a soft rhythm against the wood. The wind was always speaking. And in time, so did she. "I came here thinking marriage would save me," she said once. "Turns out, it almost killed me." He didn't nod. He didn't speak. Just looked toward the dying sun, and offered a small hum of agreement. There was peace in not being pressed. Peace in being seen, but not owned. One morning, as the mist clung low and the chickens scratched with sleepy steps, Calla stepped outside and found a small bundle on the porch, lavender tied with twine. She bent down, touched it gently, brought it to her face. The scent flooded her with memory, her mother's soap, her sister's hair, the warmth of being small and safe. She turned to look at Silas by the well. He wasn't watching her. He never did. But somehow, he knew what she needed. She pressed the flowers to her chest, and for the first time in weeks, she smiled. In town, Dunley's voice grew louder, angrier. Junie bore it in silence, bruises blooming beneath sleeves, dinners growing colder, rooms feeling smaller. He spoke Calla's name in sleep. He spat it at Junie during supper. And each time, Junie's spine straightened a little more. A storm was coming. Not of wind or sky, but of choice. Of fire. But on the porch of Silas's quiet homestead, for a brief and golden stretch of days, Calla found something like dignity. And she wasn't about to let it be taken again. The frost came earlier than expected. It whispered along the porch rail, kissed the last of the apples, and settled gently in the corners of Calla's windowpane. Morning light stretched thin, hesitant, over the land. She stood in her shawl, steaming mug between her hands, watching Silas chop wood in rhythm with the silence. His form was steady, precise. Each swing deliberate, never rushed, like a man whose only conversation was with time itself. Something had changed between them, though neither dared name it. She now helped him grind flour, hung linens beside his, and hummed lullabies when the wind rose too fierce. There were moments, small and fleeting, where their hands brushed, a pause over a spoon, a shared grip on the ladder. Her body no longer flinched at nearness. His voice, once gravel behind silence, now rumbled soft greetings and goodnights. They hadn't spoken of her past or his pain, but they lived beside each other like river and shore, separate, but shaped by the other. One afternoon, while gathering firewood alone near the ridge, Calla saw a figure on horseback. Her breath caught. It was a girl, no, a child, riding bareback down the deer trail, braids flapping like ribbon in the wind. The girl pulled up sharp when she saw Calla and slid off the horse, boots too big, face too familiar. "Auntie Calla?" she asked. Calla's knees nearly gave out. "Sage." The girl ran to her, arms thrown wide, and clung to her waist like she'd never let go. "Mama cries at night. I heard her whisper your name." Calla knelt, tears burning behind her eyes. "Where is your mama?" "With him. He drinks now." Yells. "She says she made a mistake, but she thought you were gone for good." She closed her eyes, one hand on Sage's cheek. Junie's voice echoed in her mind, her laugh, her trembling whispers on the train west, her vow to keep Calla safe. Calla rose slowly, heart pounding. Sage watched her closely. "Will you come get her?" That night, she said nothing to Silas. She couldn't, not yet. But her silence weighed heavier than before. He noticed. As they shelled peas together, he glanced at her, his brow drawn. "You see ghosts today?" he asked. She hesitated. "Maybe just a shadow I left behind." The next morning, she saddled his spare horse, wrapped a loaf of bread in linen, and tucked the locket from her mother into her pocket. Silas stood by the fence, quiet, watching. "You goin' back there?" he asked, no surprise in his tone. "I have to," she said. "She took the fall for me. I left her behind like I was free. But no one's free if someone's still caged in their place." He nodded once. Then, reaching into his coat, he handed her a small tin of salve. "For her bruises. The kind no one sees." She didn't speak. Just wrapped her arms around him, briefly, tightly. His hands trembled when they met her back. The ride to Baird's estate was long and bitter with wind. The fields looked more barren than she remembered. The gates, once polished, now sagged. No servants in sight. A hound barked listlessly. She tied the horse under the apple tree and walked up to the porch with shoulders square. Junie answered the door. Her eyes were hollow, the skin beneath them purpled. She looked smaller, as if something had eaten away the warmth in her bones. But when she saw Calla, her lips parted in a breathless whisper. "I thought you were dead." "I was," Calla said. "For a while." They embraced without words, fingers clutching shawls, tears caught in the corners of eyelids. Junie pulled her inside, ushered Sage to her room, and poured tea with shaking hands. "He drinks more now," she said. "Blames me for your fire. Says I'm a ghost of a woman. I tried to love him, Calla. I really did." "You were never meant to," Calla replied. "That wasn't your debt to pay." Footsteps thudded on the stairs. Dunley appeared in the doorway, red-eyed and swaying. He stared at Calla like he was seeing a demon. "You," he growled. "Thought you'd be too ashamed to show your face again." She stood. "I came for her. That's all." He reached for the bottle on the table, then paused, gaze flicking to the door. "You come back with fire, but you forget, this town is still mine." "No," she said quietly. "It never was." That night, Calla left with Junie and Sage. But not before Dunley swore he'd make the town remember what Calla truly was. "A ruin," he said. "Nothing but a mouthful of lies in a pretty skin." They rode in silence, Junie pressed against her in the saddle, Sage asleep between them. At dawn, the silhouette of Silas's cabin came into view, smoke curling from the chimney. Calla's breath left her like a sigh. The porch creaked as they approached, and Silas emerged, rifle in hand. But when he saw who rode with her, he set it down. They didn't speak. He opened the door, stepped aside, and let them in. The days that followed were gentler. Junie rarely left her room at first, but Calla coaxed her into the sun, into the feel of warm earth and slow chores. Sage played with the chickens. Silas mended a second bed. No one asked what came next. But the town did. Gossip rippled like a plague. Rumors that Calla had bewitched Silas. That Dunley's wife had run to the snake who lured her sister into sin. The preacher called it spiritual rot. Church women clutched their crosses. And then, one cold morning, the trouble arrived. They came in wagons. 6 men, including the sheriff and Dunley, holding a paper that meant nothing in the presence of a rifle. They surrounded the cabin, boots crunching frost. "She belongs to me," Dunley shouted. "Both of 'em. One's my wife. The other's my debt." Silas stepped onto the porch, calm, holding no weapon. "You'll find no slaves here. This ain't your business." "It is now." Calla emerged, Junie just behind her. She walked barefoot across the frozen ground, shawl around her shoulders, hair loose. "I'll come with you," she said to Dunley. "If you leave her alone." "No," Junie whispered. "Not again." Dunley laughed. "You think this is a game? I'll burn this whole shack down." From behind the barn, a second voice rang out. "I wouldn't." It was Pastor Eli. old, frail, but firm. He stood with two more townsfolk, Tom Bridger and Martha Lane, both once silent, now summoned by conscience. "You call it justice," Eli said, voice shaking. "But I call it a man's bruised pride, masked in holy cloth." Dunley turned to him, face flushing. "They're whores, Eli. You preachin' for whores now." Eli raised his cane. "I preach for grace." Tension held like a breath. Then the rifle fired. Not from Silas. Not from Eli. From Junie. The bullet struck Dunley's leg. He collapsed with a howl. The sheriff froze, gun half drawn, but didn't fire. Junie lowered the rifle with trembling arms, tears streaming. "I won't be owned," she said. "Not again." The sheriff said nothing. He turned and walked away. One by one, the others followed. The snow began to fall as Silas helped them back inside. Calla sat by the fire, Junie curled on the rug, Sage asleep under a quilt. The house held warmth, not just from flame, but from choice, from fight, from forgiveness. Later that night, as they sat on the porch swing wrapped in old wool, Silas looked at Calla. "You still think you don't deserve better?" She rested her head against his shoulder. "No. Not any more." And the stars above, silent and silver, bore witness to a woman no longer running, a sister no longer silent, and a man who saved without needing to be asked.